Welcome to Standard 5D. In this standard, we're off to Africa to describe Africa's increasing involvement in global trade. The essential question we're hoping to answer in this standard is, how did Africa become involved in foreign trade? We know from the title of the standard that it was increasing its involvement, but how did it initially become involved in foreign trade? In order to answer this question, the understanding we really want here goes back to the slave trade. The idea that the exportation of slaves from Africa and the demand inside of Africa for imported goods is going to alter the traditional economic patterns that had been found inside of Africa. Exportation refers to products that are sent to other countries for sale. The product is made, in this case, or comes from Africa and is then sold somewhere else. Imports refer to products that were made somewhere else and then sold in Africa. The product is made in another country and then sold, in this case, in Africa. And the word altered means change. To alter something is to change it or to make it different. Okay, so the idea here that the slave trade and demand for goods made in other places is really going to change the traditional economy of Africa. A way to kind of look at this question that we're answering here, we might look at an idea called the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is a theory that tries to link events that might on the surface seem completely unrelated. But the idea goes that a butterfly flapping its wings, that the movement of the air that creates might many thousands of miles away create the winds for a tornado, or that a drop of water landing in the ocean might many thousand miles away create a killer tsunami wave. Okay, the idea here we're looking at is that the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492 in the Caribbean might on the surface seem to have no connection at all to Africa. And yet that voyage across the Atlantic Ocean from Spain to the Caribbean and his arrival in those islands, it's actually going to have, unknowingly at the time, but it's going to have a big effect, huge economic effect here on Africa. Okay, so the idea here that this event that might not seem to have any connection to Africa is going to bring Africa into global trade patterns and therefore increase its foreign trade. Okay, our essential knowledge really revolves around knowing the products that Africa exported, sent out to other places, and imported, brought in from other places. The exports we need to know, as mentioned already, in the economics of the 15, 16, 1700s, largely revolved around slaves. Slaves were kidnapped, taken from their homes in Africa, and traded as part of the triangular trade routes. As we saw in Standard 4E, these triangular trade routes crisscross the Atlantic Ocean, linking the eastern and western hemisphere. Okay, leaving here Africa and traveling across to the Americas. As we mentioned, the product was slaves. There in the islands, largely of the Caribbean, the slaves were put to work. In the Caribbean, they largely produced sugar. And that sugar got sent north to the British colonies in New England. That sugar got turned into molasses, and molasses then was transformed into the alcoholic drink rum, and rum then served as the currency to buy more slaves. Okay, so those three products, part of this triangular trade route, we see again at the bottom of the triangle, slaves being exported from Africa to the Americas. This wasn't really the only triangular trade route. We see another triangular trade route here, which also involves slaves going from Africa to the Americas. This one is a little less specific. It's a little more general. In the Americas, raw materials were produced, things like lumber, things like metals, things like food crops, which were then sent across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe, and there those raw materials got turned into manufactured goods. In other words, the lumber from the Americas got sent across to Europe, where it got turned into tables and chairs. And then those manufactured goods were sent down to Africa for sale there. Once again, the triangle is a little bit different, but we see as a constant here slaves as the product leaving Africa. Okay, the other exports we want to know from Africa during this time were raw materials, specifically ivory and gold. We can see here ivory in the form of elephant tusks. That's where ivory comes from, largely banned by most countries today because of the killing of the elephants. But ivory was a high demand product from Africa during this time period, and also gold. Okay, so these two raw materials were big exports from Africa. Okay, we have some imports, products brought into Africa we want to know as well. Africa imported manufactured goods from Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Things like metalworked products like we see here, products like furniture, products like textiles. Okay, in other words, these were things made from raw materials produced by the slaves and then sent back to Europe to be turned into manufactured products and then brought back for sale in Africa. Okay, the other big imports in Africa involved agricultural products, new food products, specifically corn and peanuts. These two products originated in the Americas. Corn in Mexico and Central America, peanuts down in South America. But both of these products become caught up in the Columbian Exchange and are then traded across the Atlantic Ocean. Corn in particular becomes a major food crop in Africa and becomes a large part of the diet of people in large parts of Africa. Okay, so we see there the two agricultural products traded as part of this. Just to wrap up here, the exports that were responsible for knowing, the products sent out of Africa for trade included people, okay, taken from their homes as slaves, ivory taken from the tusks of elephants, and gold. Okay, these things were sent from Africa to other parts of the world. The imports brought into Africa from other parts of the world included manufactured goods, things made out of raw materials and turned into finished products, and agricultural products including corn and peanuts. And that pretty much wraps up Standard 5D.